A closer look summary. In this closer look, I'll analyze the moves that this writer makes in order to write a summary. And this writer happens to be me. I wrote it. So getting into the mind of me as a writer should be pretty easy. First, let's go over what a summary is. A summary is the main point of the essay. You are basically trying to pick out the thesis, whether stated directly or indirectly, and then put that main idea into your own words. The purpose in writing a summary is to be able to give someone the gist of an article, movie, book, etc. After your summary, the person should have a fairly good idea what the text was about. So here are the key points of a summary. Keep it short. No longer than a paragraph is needed. A summary can be as short as 1 or 2 sentences, but for the purposes of this assignment, please make it at least 4 or 5, so we can be sure to get a complete idea of the article that you read. Don't write a book report. This isn't the story of the article. Like, this happened first and then this happened. You don't want to just regurgitate the whole thing. There may be some of that in a summary, but you'll notice that I didn't do that in mine, what I'll show you later. I actually begin by commenting on the stories that the author tells at the end of her article because I felt that that's where her main point is truly revealed. That being said, another important part of the summary is explaining how the author made her point. Did the author use stories, present data from a research study, organize the material in an unusual way? And lastly, try to be as fair and accurate as possible, not using personal opinion in this part of the assignment. So, how do I write a summary? My suggestion? Read the article. Right after you read the article, write down what you think the main point was and add any important details you remember that are important to the main point. Do this without looking at the article again. That's a way to ensure that it's in your own words. After you've done that, read the article again and take notes about key areas you missed. Then start over from scratch with all that info in your head, maybe even using some of the same sentences to create a more full summary. Another way to look at it is like this. Pretend you're telling a friend what the article's about. That friend has not read the article, so you need to make sure to give a complete and fair description of the article. So I usually write longhand in a notebook, scratching out words, drawing arrows to connect to other parts that I write down later. Then I type it up and revise as I type. Then I go back and revise again. So essentially, for anything that I write 3 drafts at least. It's not a bad practice, and it's not as time-consuming as you might think. I wrote a summary of Robin Wilson's article, A Lifetime of Student Debt, Not Likely. So I'm just going to read this to you very quickly to show you kind of my process of writing a summary. So in the article blank, without looking at the article again, I couldn't remember what the title was when I was writing this. Robin Wilson was responding to the argument that students are carrying too much. I didn't think that was right, so I scratched it out. Going into unreasonable amounts of debt in order to afford a college education by giving examples, and I decide, no, I don't want to do that. Wilson, not disagrees, rejects the idea by explaining that the most students come away with a reasonable amount of debt, $20,000, an amount that can be paid back, and the education they received is well worth going into debt for. Indeed, college graduates make far more money than their peers without degrees. There are the outlier cases where students do borrow more than the average amount, but she shows that these few cases are students who were irresponsible with their monetary choices by, say, attending a more expensive private school than they could realistically afford. So after I write that summary, I go back and I read the article again, and I come up with a few other points that I think are important to add to my summary to get a more full picture. So I say, concedes that price of education is getting higher and that more students are obtaining loans and for more money. And notice that sentence was not even a complete sentence. That was just a note, basically, that I'll have to turn into a complete sentence later. As the same with this one. Tell story after story of those who were able to pay their student loans just fine and don't complain about the amount of the sacrifices they made to pay for that education. So here is my final summary. Now, I'm not going to read it out loud to you. I would like you to do that on your own. But there are a few things I want you to notice. First is that I did not put my response to this at all, whether I agree or disagree, in the summary. That's not what the summary is for. That is what the response is for. But here's my first writing strategy. I kept it short. This summary is only 5 sentences, and yes, I know this one paragraph that takes up a whole page, you're like, what? That's 5 sentences? Yes, they're longer sentences, and I packed them with a lot of material each. So if you were to write 5 short sentences, that would probably not be enough to adequately summarize the entire article. My next writing strategy, give context for the article up front. I introduced the article's name and author in the first sentence. I explained what she was responding to because most articles are responding to something, an idea, another argument, another report. That's the they say part. And then I explained what her argument was. And for her, that's the I say part. My next writing strategy is to comment on how the author makes an argument. I give a few more details about how she makes her argument using personal stories and by presenting the claims of those on the other side, which is called a counter-argument, and that's something we'll learn more about in our research unit. And then I wrap up her main idea worded in a different way, which is the last writing strategy, to conclude the main idea worded in a different way. And I'll just go ahead and read that one to you. Wilson does concede that the price of education is growing and that more students are obtaining loans for more money. But by the end of her article, we are to understand that the cost of choosing debt to pay for college is far lower than choosing not to go to college at all. Students just need to choose less expensive colleges. So I want to explain something because hopefully you read this article and you might have noticed Wilson doesn't actually say that students need to choose less expensive colleges to avoid massive debt, but she alludes to it strongly by saying that those who go into debt are those students who went to expensive colleges. So I read between the lines and really thought, that's her main point, or one of her main points. And another thing that I want you to notice that you might not have known before is when you're talking about the author, you always you can introduce the author's first and last name at the beginning, as you should, but when you're talking about the author next, you can just use their last name. And also, when you're talking about what they write about in their article, use the present tense and not the past tense. All right. Good luck with your summaries.